Welcome to the Munro Review, where it's all about connecting, sharing, and valuing the arts in the central San Joaquin Valley. I'm Donald Munro. Today is August 29th, and we're here to talk about the busy art scene in September. On today's show, we offer a special focus on the Fresno Art Museum and its exciting new lineup of exhibitions, including a story in the field about Fresno State art professor Nick Potter. And we check in with the busy folks at the Selma Arts Center, who are telling a tale as old as time. I think you can guess what show they're doing. But first, let's recap some of what I've been covering at MunroReview.com. After an enormously busy month for me in July, I was able to slow down a little in August and take some time to work on some longer-term projects and prepare for the art season ahead. Now that school has started and Labor Day is just about behind us, we can focus on exciting times in terms of theater, art, classical music, and more. One story I'll point you to is an interview with Ashlyn Gordon, winner of the CMT's Got Talent competition in August. She is a dancer. What's special about her is that she was a foster child who connected with a family that supports her talents and dreams. There's a fine show at the Second Space Theater to recommend. Good Company's My Cousin Rachel is a smartly acted and crisply directed murder mystery set in 19th century England, though it's far more than just a simple whodunit. Brooke Aiello and Anthony Tenianhouse offer gripping and seductive performances. He as a younger, wealthy man, and she the mysterious and beautiful older cousin who walks into his life. My Cousin Rachel continues through October 13th. In case you missed my extensive theater coverage from July and early August, you'll still find my flurry of previews, interviews, and reviews on MunroReview.com. Some of those late-breaking early August pieces include reviews of Legally Blonde from Center Stage Clovis and La Cage aux Folles from Stageworks Fresno. If you didn't get to see Joel Abels as Alban in La Cage, you missed a memorable performance. Now, let's get to our first in-studio guest. Michelle Ellis-Precy is Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Fresno Art Museum, and she is here to talk about the new lineup of exhibitions at the museum. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Donald. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. This is always an exciting time when you have a new round of exhibitions.
It is.
That are just kind of hitting the field. What can you tell us about this year's lineup?
Well, this season is very fun for us because we have 5 solo shows, and we have 2 artists from Fresno that are Fresno based, 1 from the Bay Area and 2 from Monterey area. So they each do a very different style of artwork. Several are painters, 1 is an illustrator, 1 is a collage artist, 1 is a public sculpture, interactive installation. So the museum is alive with all kinds of things this time.
So one of the exhibitions, and one of the major exhibitions, is your Council of 100 exhibition, and that artist is named Heather Wilcoxon.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the Council of 100 is?
Yes, back in the 70s, Judy Chicago, who is famous for her dinner party, was a professor at Fresno State. And Robert Barrett was the director of the museum at that time. And Judy Chicago was just making the scene as a feminist, as a powerful woman artist speaking about women issues in America and the world at large. And he decided that he needed to create a group of women, local women, who would choose an artist who was a woman over the age of 60, who was nationally recognized and deserved to be honored. And that very first year, they only showed women artists for that entire year. But this is the 30th year, consecutive year, that a woman artist has been chosen to be honored, and Heather Wilcoxon is the 2019 honoree.
That's very impressive to do anything for 30 years.
Exactly.
So tell us a little about her. She is from Sausalito, and I understand she actually lives on a boat.
Yeah, she lives on a houseboat, a barge, actually. A barge. She qualified that for me a few weeks ago. And I haven't visited the barge. I have visited her studio in Sausalito. She is a sailor. She's 70 years old, and she loves the sea. And this series of paintings are a survey, so there are a few early paintings from the 90s, but most of them have been done in the 2000s. And she uses shipwrecked boats on tumultuous oceans to describe her feelings about our current political climate. So if you look at them in that light, you can feel what she's feeling about our country right now.
So a very tumultuous feel. I remember when I was looking at some of them, it's like, wow, I feel like I'm being tossed around.
Exactly, but the boats don't sink. They stay afloat, and so there's also hope and perseverance and survival in these paintings as well.
So let's take a look at one of them, and it's titled Spill.
Correct.
What can you tell us about this
Spill
work?
is very iconographic for the rest of the exhibition because it is a magnificent wooden vessel, no sails. It's on the ocean, and out of it is spilling this white froth. And that could be our hearts bleeding, that could be our feelings, it could be our mental state, and it's just a super powerful piece.
I'm glad you told us, though, that the boats actually stay afloat.
They do.
Because that
They
gives
do.
the show kind of a different feel.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
It's not so grim. It's descriptive, but nobody's dying. Nobody's sinking. Nobody's giving up.
So another one of the shows is by an artist who's originally from Bogota,
Right.
Carmen Hoyos. And it's a fun show. It really is vibrant and alive. Tell us about that.
Well, Carmen started coming to the museum about 2 years ago, and she introduced me to her work via her website, which is phenomenal. And she's a very well-known artist in France and in Belgium for her site-specific public interactive works. They're very complex. They're very all-encompassing. It can be a vendor selling chocolate from gallery to gallery. I mean, she's very, very creative, and she wanted to use the museum as a canvas. And so we started working with her, Sarah Vargas, who's the curator, and myself, and she created this piece called The Path for the lobby space, down the hallway, and out into the garden. And her whole point is, yes, this is a difficult time for America. She just got her green card, so she's not a citizen, but she's very proud to live in this country now. And she wanted people to feel joy and to counterbalance whatever negativity they might be feeling with very positive experience.
And she uses lots of interesting material
Right.
for this.
Yeah, she
Very bright.
For this show, she worked in plexiglass, and it's a very heavy material. She's painted it on one side so that the painted side has a very matte sense to it, and then you look on the glossy side, it's a completely different painting. And she's applied them to the walls. We hang them from the ceilings on monofilament so they float and they move as you walk by them. So they're like bubbles of joy. And then on a huge wall opposite one wall as you go down the hallway, she's put words that she wants you to read and think about.
And you can even follow this all the way out into the sculpture garden.
Exactly. We have a map specifically for her show, and the titles are notated by little numbers at the very bottom of the wall. So
It's a really fun exhibition. Now, I want to talk just for a few seconds about Nick Potter's
Yes.
show. We actually have a field story that we are going to be showing after this interview.
Good.
Tell us just one thing about Nick that you think we should know.
I think Nick is a very complex person, and I think it has to do with how he was raised, where he was raised, how he perceived the world as a child, and how he translates it in his artwork as a grown-up. He's delightful.
It really is a powerful show and really makes you think differently about architecture.
It does, and about where we choose to live and what we'd like to live in. Maybe we never could, but he paints the places that we could.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. We mentioned it briefly, but now it's time to dive in depth into one of the museum's exhibitions, which we've just been talking about, titled Constructed Utopias. Producer Kyle Lowe, camera operator Sarah Gonzalez, and I met up with artist Nick Potter for a walkthrough of this fascinating collection of paintings focusing on architecture. Here's our report. So we are here today at the Fresno Art Museum, and we are talking with Nick Potter, who has an exciting new exhibition that is going to be on display for a long time
Yeah.
for a matter of months. So Nick, can you tell us what's the title of your exhibition and what's your quick pitch for folks?
Yeah, hi. The show's called Constructed Utopias, and in a way they're all sort of different approaches to the idea of a sort of unattainable utopia, or a utopia that is on the edge of falling to a dystopia, what I'm really interested in is the attempt to create utopias that constantly sort of fail, and I think that really comes from my experience of modernist architecture growing up, and then visiting lots of important buildings that are often the kind of held up as examples of modernist architecture, and close to a utopia, and seeing how those exist and aren't attainable for most people, and then also seeing buildings which seem to have something not quite right about them. They seem isolated or they seem abandoned, and just kind of fears about our world and how struggles to sort of make it work, I think is what the biggest sort of ideas.
So when you walk into this space, it's interesting because at first it has kind of a bright, optimistic feel, but as you get closer to the works and you start looking at them, you realize there's something off about each one.
Right. Yeah, that's really something that I enjoy. That I'm attracted to the architecture and find it quite beautiful, and reminds me of Mondrian or has some beautiful pattern to it, and I like the materials, but there are never people in the paintings, or rarely, and then I think as you start looking further, you feel like with the color choices and the lighting that there's something a little mysterious, foreboding, something that's under the surface you can't
dark and ominous.
Yeah,
maybe
but you
just
can never
on the
quite pin it
horizon.
down. Yeah, unless I painted things that have something on fire, that's more obvious. But most of these are pretty subtle, and I think it just sort of maybe just gets under your skin a little bit. Something doesn't quite seem right about that. This painting it's based on the Hockney painting. As a student, spent a lot of time looking at his work and was really taken by his advertisement for California. It was just like it seemed so perfect and ideal. And of course he was in LA, experiencing LA in the 60s and the 70s, and
it made everyone in England want to go to California, right?
Absolutely. So it was a lot of propaganda, but I wanted to change things about it and make them more acidic and a little bit more disturbing. So that's why the orange, dashes of orange in there, and the way that the water looks. At first, maybe you think that's a beautiful sky, but then there's something about the color and the way that it's glowing towards us that sort of feels a little bit off. I was just trying to sort of really shift that mood of perhaps a more up-to-date version of LA and its, and the sort of fears about our environment as well, and all the fires and all that sort of stuff.
So let's take a look at this work over here. You mentioned that you grew up in a housing block in London. Was it?
Yeah, in West London. Yeah.
What have you gone and researched, like the particular block that you lived in, and was it kind of sold as a utopia? Was it sold as this is going to make your life better?
Yeah, absolutely. In the 60s and early 70s in London, that was the way they were dealing with a sort of small housing crisis, which had a lot to do with recovering from the Second World War, needing to have government housing. And it's a direct correlation to Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier and all those architects who made these great examples of modernist architecture and housing blocks. And in some cases, some of the buildings in my neighborhood were closer to a hint of Le Corbusier in them, and others were simpler and a little bit more brutal, and in a way sort of really felt like this sort of socialist housing from Poland in the 60s or something like that. I mean, it's like there was no frills, no decorative elements, right? It was functional. Even though it's mostly concrete, it's still beautifully done. And in our buildings, they skimped on all that stuff. So then the buildings just aren't it's not an environment that's sort of conducive to people really caring about where they live, and you get that it slipped off into that dystopia pretty quickly. That was the sort of building that I grew up in, and really sort of had an effect on me. I mean, it wasn't till I came to the States, that I first started seeing Mies van der Rohe buildings in person in Chicago on Lakeshore, and it's like, okay, this is I get it now. This is what it was meant to be. This is a building in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte, which is a city a few hours west of Rio. This is a Oscar Niemeyer building. He sort of single-handedly redesigned modern cities in Brazil, and his architecture often has lots of beautiful curves, and that's his house. I actually went into the apartment on the bottom left of this, the lower floor, and it was incredible. You know, it was such a beautiful building, and we went to the top and had a view of the city as well.
Do you see this building as kind of sliding toward dystopia as well, or is this an optimistic?
At first, I thought of it as optimistic, but the city around it, you see lots of tall buildings that really feel like it feels like it's sort of stuck in about 1972. You know, and lots of Brazilian cities seem like that. And if you're in parts of Miami and everything's brand new, all these giant apartment blocks that are 50 stories, and in Belo Horizonte, looking from the top, you did feel like this was a city that was on the kind of edge of falling apart, and the social problems in Brazil are really prevalent at the moment. So that was something that could change my view of it. Even though I really thought this building was beautiful, it was sort of falling apart in places. They're repairing it constantly.
Well, it is a fascinating show, and thank you very much for taking the time to give us a little tour.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm really glad you like the show, and it's great to talk to you about it. Thanks.
Constructed Utopias continues through January 5th, 2020 at the Fresno Art Museum. For more details, go to fresnoartmuseum.org. Now, it's time for a little beauty, plus some beast. Beauty and the Beast is one of the most popular community theater titles around, and now the Selma Art Center is getting its candlesticks on it. Let's welcome 3 guests from a new production coming in September. We have Jessica Meredith, Aaron Pierce, and Emma Denbeston. Welcome, thank you. I think we got you guys out of rehearsal tonight, right?
Yes, you did.
So we all pretty much know the story of Beauty and the Beast. If you don't, just turn off your sets and you might want to be surprised. Mm-hmm. But tell us, what is different about this Beauty and the Beast?
So we're running with a little bit of source material because obviously it's been produced so many times in so many different ways that it starts to stagnate a little bit. There's a lot of that recycled cartoony quality and everybody's just doing their best Disney sort of impersonation. And we wanted to give it a little bit more natural life. We wanted to bring out some kind of human qualities, a little bit more of the dark side of some of the characters and their struggles with retaining their humanity. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more of an honest, fresh perspective from the actors as well as some of the set design and that kind of thing.
And because, I mean, this story has been told so many different ways, adapted in so many ways over the decades.
Yeah.
So it'll be nice to see something a little different. And before we go on, let's just remind people what you're playing, who you're playing. So you are...
So I'm Aaron, and I am Beast.
You're the Beast.
Yes.
Emma,
I'm playing Belle.
You're playing Belle. And Jessica?
I'm playing Mrs. Potts.
So you get to sing the song.
Yes, it's
We'll capitalize that, the song, right?
It's really fun to try to take my own take on it and try not to do anything anybody else has done because we've all heard it a million times, and so it's been fun for me to kind of just work on it and make it my own. So
when we're talking about how the show is going to be staged, is it traditional in the sense, say that Jessica, you are going to be in a teapot? I mean, is the costume still going to suggest that?
I think it'll be teapot-like, but I'm not going to be, with my hand up for most of the show.
Okay.
So I'm excited to see. I think our team of costumers are going to bring us some really awesome things to work with.
So it sounds a little more conceptual then. Maybe a little more of the imagination. Emma?
The biggest difference really is we've brought in some professional level dancers, and they're like classically trained ballerinas, and they're kind of woven throughout the entire show, and it really just highlights, I don't know, the classic tale, kind of going beyond just the Disney version that everybody knows and loves. That's still in it, that's still there, but it kind of has this newer element of like really high, fine art that I don't think you normally expect to see when you watch Beauty and the Beast.
So Emma, you have an interesting story here. You actually have played Belle before.
Yes.
How old were you when you did that?
I was 15 when I
15.
played Belle before. Yeah.
And what production was that?
That was Beauty and the Beast Junior with Stageworks Fresno back in 2011. It was their one and only children's production. But
With
yeah.
puppets. They used a lot of puppets.
Yes, because it was in the Dan Pisano Theater, so
Okay.
pretty
And so
neat.
what is it like to come back to Belle several years later?
It's really interesting because when I was a teenager and I played it, I was certain that by the time I was 22, I would not be in Fresno anymore. So it's interesting to be singing about, you know, getting out of this provincial town, but kind of with less malice. And I don't know, it's just a much more mature perspective. And when Belle sings, like, you know, A Change in Me, which is cut from a lot of versions, you see that she's really grappling with good and evil existing, you know, side by side, and things not being ultimately good and ultimately bad. And I think I just have a much better understanding of that now than I did when I was a youngin'.
Now, Aaron, you are playing the Beast, which
Yes.
is often thought of as, of course, a really gruff, gruesome type of creature. But tell us about your kind of take on this character.
So this character is a character that I've wanted to play for a really long time. I think there's a little bit of Beast in everybody. I think that we kind of start conceiving a little bit of that dark, brooding side in us from a young age when we see that not everybody's going to like us the way that they want us, or that we want them to. They're not going to perceive us the way that we perceive ourselves. And it's really easy to become jaded by something like that. And so I get to embrace the jade in this, and I get to be angry at the world for a while, and I get to kind of like get out some of that tension. And then later on in the show, I get the opportunity to kind of work through that on stage and craft and weave my own new perspective.
So, Jessica, had you always wanted to be in Beauty and the Beast? This is the first time for you, right?
Yeah, it's the first time. My partner, Regina, loves Beauty and the Beast. And so when I thought about wanting to do this show, I was like, why not? Like, it'll be fun. And I wasn't expecting, you know, I was just wanted to be in it. And so the fact that I got to play I get to play Mrs. Potts is awesome. And it's so much fun because people are like, you're nurturing. Like, that should be second nature to you. And I'm like, all right, I get that. Like, and I just, it's fun. It's fun to get to play and stuff too.
So do you ever think that the Beast gets kind of a rough break? I mean, he makes one mistake and gets really like transformed forever. What do you think, Emma? Do you think it's a little harsh?
I think it is a little harsh, but you know, it's kind of like all of the mythic tales. It's his hubris that he's being punished for, and I kind of like the high drama, and I like that it's this big punishment for like kind of a small crime, because I don't know, to me it's like this was his fate to go through this and to live this story out so that people don't repeat it.
Well, and I've always loved that it's about books, or that it really tells you that books are important, right? I love the library scene. It's one of my favorites. So tell us, when does your production open?
September
Jessica or Aaron?
20th through October 5th.
Okay, so it opens September 20th.
Yes.
And so that's just a 2-week run then?
3 weeks.
Oh, a 3-week run. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that there are lots of kids out there who still haven't seen Beauty and the Beast, or are you going to have to be playing to repeat audience?
Not after this. We have a handful of kids shows that we're going to be doing where we're bringing in schools, and we're going to perform specifically for them. And we're going to have Sunday tea times with Belle, where people can bring in their children before the show and have a little tea time before the show.
Well,
I think I'm more excited than anyone
I think
else.
that sounds like so much fun. It's like one of those memories they'll remember forever. Well, thank you for coming in. We're actually going to be hearing a song from Jessica in just a few moments to close out the show. Can you guess what that song's going to be? I don't know. But first, let's take a look at the list, a selection of things to do in September. It's hard to believe that our time with Louise Mandrell is so fleeting, but her 2-month run in Calamity Jane is almost over. Good Company Players opens Man of La Mancha on September 19th. The Fresno Philharmonic kicks off its new season with Curtain Up, Bernstein, and Strauss on September 22nd. The program includes Candide by Bernstein, Der Rosenkavalier Suite by Strauss, and an exciting new work by Vivian Fung titled Earworms. And for visual arts fans, Clayhan Studios presents a retrospective of ceramic works by Robert Ogata, one of Fresno's most beloved and acclaimed artists. The opening Art Hop reception is 5 to 8 p.m. September 5th. When we return, Jessica will sing to us from Beauty and the Beast. Now let's welcome Jessica Meredith, who is not at the moment dressed as a teapot, who will be singing the title song from Beauty and the Beast.
Tale as old as time, true as it can be, barely even friends, then somebody bends unexpectedly. Just a little change, small to say the least, both a little scared, neither one prepared, Beauty and the Beast. Ever just the same, ever a surprise, ever as before, ever just as sure as the sun will rise. Tale as old as time, tune as old as song, bittersweet and strange, finding you can change, learning you were wrong, certain as the sun, rising in the east. Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme, Beauty and the Beast. Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme, Beauty and the Beast.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. Well, that wraps it up for this month's episode of the Munro Review. Be sure to keep up online at munroreview.com for previews, reviews, giveaways, profiles, and more. A big thank you to our volunteer crew. Yay! And a thank you to all our guests, Michelle Ellis-Bracey and Nick Potter from the Fresno Art Museum, and Jessica Meredith, Erin Pierce, and Emma Denbeston from Beauty and the Beast. And for all of you, please keep exploring and supporting the local art scene. We'll see you next time.
Woo!